It is fashionable and perhaps factual to say there's never been a year like 2020. A pandemic, mass protests over racial equality, a deeply divided electorate, an upcoming election, and more. It is the latest challenge for America, the largest democracy in the world and one of its oldest. This morning, we highlight the authors of a new book, Four Threats, which takes a look at the stakes involved, both now and over the past 200-plus years.
American politics has had troubling trends that have been emerging for years, and I think for both of us, we've been trying to get our minds around those things.
Suzanne Mettler and Robert Lieberman have been writing about American politics for decades. For them, the current moment seems overwhelming.
I would run into colleagues of mine who study other countries in the world and study the decline of democracy in various places, and they seem to have more of an understanding of what was going on than I did. And they would say things like, well, you know, democracies, they come and they go, they don't last forever. And as a student of American politics, I was sort of horrified by the idea that we were thinking of the United States in that way.
Mettler and Lieberman's latest book takes a look at what they believe are the four threats to American democracy: expansive presidential power, political polarization, rising economic inequality, and racism or nativism. In which direction are all these issues trending right now?
They've all been on the rise.
Yeah. The book examines how these issues spiked alarmingly at different points in our history. The first crisis right after America's founding, in the 1790s, when political polarization hit a dangerous level, fueled by the warring factions of Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. The clash was crystallized in the Whiskey Rebellion, a tax dispute that led to widespread protests in western Pennsylvania. George Washington sent in federal soldiers to quell the violence and was widely praised for it, but not by all.
It caught the attention of a lot of people that here you had this federal government that was using its power in a way that most Americans didn't think would happen. They thought that was counter to the spirit of the American Revolution.
What starts out as a policy disagreement really almost becomes an identity conflict between people who are affiliated with the Federalists and Washington and Hamilton and other people who are affiliated with the Democratic Republicans and Jefferson and Madison. If you and I disagree about what the government should do about something, that's normal, that's natural, that's fine. But when that kind of dispute becomes a matter of combat between enemies, existential.
It's existential to you feel that deeply about
exactly.
it. And that's happening right now.
Exactly.
Because you feel like you can't have a rational debate about it because you're so attached to one part.
And both sides saw each other as treasonous.
During the 1850s, Mettler and Lieberman say we reached another dangerous level when the country continued fighting over its original sin, slavery. That led to the next great threat, post-Reconstruction, as the promise of equality was pushed aside in favor of segregation. America's first moment of executive overreach, Mettler and Lieberman argue, didn't happen until the 1930s, under Franklin Roosevelt, when many of his aggressive measures to pull the United States out of the Great Depression came under legal challenges. Roosevelt attempted unsuccessfully to expand the Supreme Court to increase his support. The trend of increasing presidential power continues today. Has the expanded power of the American presidency been a good or bad thing?
It's allowed for the country to meet unanticipated challenges and emergencies in ways that were difficult to conceive in the 19th century, but at the cost of giving a single individual a lot of authority that he can use in ways that we might, in the end, not find so satisfying.
Did the founders intend for the presidency to be that powerful?
In general, no.
Executive overreach hit a peak during the Nixon administration, when the president sanctioned criminal activity to target his political rivals. From the 1980s on, Lieberman and Mettler believe all four threats have been growing, especially political polarization, which they say hasn't been this bad in 130 years. It felt like a generation ago, you could have a political conversation potentially at the dinner table, but it was going to be fraught and maybe to be avoided. But today, if it comes up, no holds barred. It's bad immediately.
That's right.
And everyone's intransigent about it, right?
Yeah.
Why?
We've sorted ourselves out in all sorts of ways.
They say they wrote this book to give Americans a sense of both how messy and fragile democracy can be. Do you think people should leave this book discouraged or hopeful?
You know, I'm fundamentally an optimist, so there's an opportunity here for Americans to do something that we haven't done before, and that is to find a way out of this crisis where we make the United States more equal and more inclusive, rather than having a settlement that excludes some people, particularly based on race.
I think people sometimes think that since this is the oldest democracy and the most successful democracy, that it will always be that way.
I think history teaches us that democracies don't last forever, and that maintaining a democracy and strengthening a democracy is hard work. One of the things that history demonstrates is that there are usually people who are willing to do the work. They don't always prevail in the way that we'd like them to. But Americans have not given up the ghost.
Love that line. Americans haven't given up the ghost.
Great piece. And I think that everyone, oh, you were kind of taken back by it. But no, really, I think clearly people are hungry right now in this moment for history and trying to understand where all of this comes from. And I want to ask you, are you hopeful after reading that? Because to hear some of what they said, it was like, wow.
But yeah, there's also hard stuff. I mean, they deal with some very difficult subjects. But yes, I think, I mean, I would agree with Suzanne to the extent that you remain hopeful, but you don't know. And I think one of the interesting things they do in this book is that they do make it a little more accessible. You know, it's not 1,000 pages, just over 200 pages. So you can spend a little time with it and hopefully get some perspective on both the past and right now.
All right, Jeff Glor, thank you.
That's me.